to get a direct signpost to a particular piece of funding, which I totally get. But I think
it's never that easy, is it?
No, well, that's the point. It isn't that easy, and it involves some creative thinking, creative activity. Hello, everybody else who's joined. We're just going to give it a minute or so to before we get properly started, to give other people a chance to get on board.
I'm back on, Peter.
Yeah, are you there, Roy?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm not going to be on video for obvious reasons.
No worries.
So, but I will. So direct any, if there are any questions for me, which there may or may not be, then just direct them to me and I'll answer them on.
Yeah, there is. There's definitely one for you. Yeah,
oh,
definitely.
Dear. That's a pity. Can I not throw it to someone else? There's so many more capable people. Yeah, I hope it hasn't. As long as it's got nothing to do with whether or not Sunderland will be promoted from League One next year, then I'll be fine with it.
Well, you can but hope, Roy. You can but hope.
No chance on that.
Hope.
Portsmouth.
Thanks very much indeed. It's good to know that there's some support out there for my football team.
Yeah,
they're a bunch of absolute knackers, but apart from that, they're fine.
Right, you're the try being a Pompey supporter.
Who's the Pompey supporter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you've beaten us in the playoffs at least once recently, so.
Yeah, and a cup final.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one. Although we've won it since.
Steady, Jason. Roy's our friend. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Don't upset him.
I'm being very diplomatic.
You're being marvellous. You could be a lot worse. You could be the Newcastle supporter.
Very true.
Okay, guys. Well, look, we're going to get cracking because the clock's ticking. What we've done is, for everybody who's attending, we've given you the ability to unmute your microphone and directly ask a question in due course. I've got some I'm going to go through first. What I would ask is that you use the facility to raise your hand or ask a question in the meeting chat, which I'm hoping technical guys have also enabled for you to use, and we'll answer as many as we can. So going to kick this off with the first question. Top of the list, it's for you, Mr. Allen, this one. And it's a sort of conglomeration of 4 or 5 questions that on basically the same subject. So what I'll try to do is, rather than answer each one individually, I've pulled it together, and it seems to be most appropriate for yourself. So what are your views on the current drive to interoperability in telecare, and do you think it is working? And a secondary one on the same subject, which we can drop onto to Paul Shead. What role do you see the ARC platform providers playing in this? So if we start with you, Mark, let's go with that. How do you feel about interoperability? Is it going well?
It's a loaded question, I think, that one, Peter.
What you mean?
Yeah, I think there's a number of challenges on that, and I think it depends on the perspective, because there's interoperability with existing systems, for example, and how we drag data across from systems and feed them into our social care system, for example, and how we integrate with health services and things like that. So there's a range of stuff around that, and I think that challenge has lived with us for a long time. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. So there's a challenge of that, and that's variable. I think in terms of the ARC platform, from my perspective, the art platforms are going to play a major role in helping us share data. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that we probably need to be doing is looking at how we can drag the data out of those systems and start to use it more effectively. My understanding, and it's limited in its way, but it's more extensive than a lot of people's in terms of that don't work directly in the industry, is a lot of the data that's collected by ARP systems just sits there and it's never explored by anybody. And actually, we've got, even on the platforms we've got at the moment, we've probably got a rich level of data that could be exploited to some degree. My view is, as we move to more digital platforms, we'll have even more data, and we do need a discussion about what sort of data, what sort of information we collect, how we use that, and how we communicate that with people, clients, and explain to them about why we're collecting data and why we're using it in particular ways. One of the big challenges for my industry, social care, is how we can use data and the systems that we've got and the platforms we use to better understand people's conditions and their needs and wants and changes in their conditions, so that we can predict how we put in place better and more appropriate services, and use the scarce resources we've got more effectively. So that's one level of answer to that question. I think there's a second one, which is one that I'm a bit not obsessed with, but one that I focus on a bit more than that in a sense, and I shouldn't do really, but I do, is this issue of interoperability for individuals. And I think there's an issue here around understanding how people use the technology that we ask them to put in their homes more effectively into their lives, and it's about how people integrate that into their lives. And I think for me, there's a second challenge here, which is about how we as professionals working in a particular industry, whether it be the telecare, techs, or social care or health sectors, start to understand the impact on people's lives as the sorts of interventions we ask them to adopt, and how that integrates with their lives more effectively. And I think as the devices we use, the platforms that we develop, and the data we start to drag out, what role is that playing on their lives, and how is it integrating into the other things that they use? As I think I mentioned earlier on today about, use IoT devices and all the rest of it. People will use them regardless of what we do. They're there. How do we make sure that that integration, interoperability works there? So for me, there's two levels. That's a bit of a long-winded answer, I'm afraid, but
No, I totally agree with you on that, on both counts, and I think understanding that, I think in the future there's going to be the requirement or the desire for organisations to want access to the data that the end users are creating from their own devices. And I think that's where interoperability will really start to look forward in the future in terms of that bring your own device almost scenario, and how we work that. So if there's great data coming from my smartwatch, how can I give that to innovation that through the ARC system, if that's what how do we connect everything together to get the best out of it? But that's an interesting what and you alluded to this as well, Mark. Paul, what role do you think the ARC platform providers have got in this to play in this?
So, of course, I have an interest which I need to declare. I provide the EMO monitoring platform from Innovation. From my perspective, I believe all platform providers need to commit fully to opening up their systems, less protectionism, allowing other suppliers of other devices to interoperate correctly, wherever possible using the published protocols that are already available that we discussed in the session earlier on. And where that's not possible, to still open up and allow proper integration of devices from anywhere. I think the days of protectionism in the telecare industry are gone. I think it's not the right way forward. And to grow the industry and to maximize the benefits for the industry and for the people who receive these services, I think we have to open the whole thing up and allow natural competition and allow the best of products to rise to the surface. and the best of services to rise to the surface. The second thing, on the data side, we completely agree with everything Mark just said. The data tends to stay unaccessed by anybody else, just the monitoring centre, and not really used proactively, typically by the monitoring centre, to offer more preventative type services. They're still very reactive telecare type services. So one thing we're doing is we've released a reporting API to allow business analytics engines to plug in to UMO and to query the data in the UMO database and create triggers. So trend analysis, and then should something change for that end user, that it triggers an alarm event into UMO and allows the operator to see that whole picture and take some kind of intervention action. So I completely agree. Opening up the whole platform is the way forward, in my opinion. I'd like to see everybody do it.
Okay. Mr. Finch, that interesting comments from both guys on this particular question, and interoperability again, as we talked about earlier, a big drive from the TSA towards that, big theme of the last conference. How do you feel it's going? And I'd like your comments, particularly on Paul's statement about the our platform providers opening up. How do you feel that that's a necessity? Do you think that's what should happen?
I think the information that Mark said initially is right, that we are data-rich intelligence poor, and I think we should be looking at using that information more intelligently. I think when we talked about some of the sessions earlier about the migration to digital, people shouldn't be just looking at replacing equipment like for like. They should be looking at their wraparound service and how digital enables those changes in service delivery, and digital will enable that. And I think using the data from the platforms is crucial to that process. So using those pieces of information for predictive services rather than reactive services, as Paul Shead quite rightly said. So from our point of view, the more we can enable that information flow to ensure we're giving the right service interventions before there's an incident, I think is an important factor. Looking at interoperability generally, the discussions we're having internally is that I think interoperability, if you talk to several sectors, it means different things to different people. It can be around interoperability of peripherals to a base unit, or it can be the way that the device talks to the platform, or it can be how the social care systems talk to the platforms. And we're looking at this and how we deal with it in a priority-based functionality. One of the first areas is around that communication with the platform. And I agree with Paul that we should be making sure that we're using those European standards to make sure that equipment does communicate effectively with the system. Because for me personally, I think we've got to remember that it's the service user that we are trying to protect here. And they are the paramount factor in what we should be considering in all the aspects of work that we deliver. Yeah,
well, that's something I think we all believe in, and those who don't should believe in. Mr. Sandbach, you're hidden away somewhere because your video's not on, as we know. What's your thoughts on this?
I'm here. I think that interoperability is a key topic, and I don't know whether you all know, but I'm chairing the TAPI inquiry into technology for older and vulnerable people. This follows up on a previous inquiry called HAPPY, which developed some design criteria for older people's housing. And interoperability has come up many times through the witness statements and the panel. Now, what am I going to say? First, Paul's point about opening up these platforms for people to play on is entirely the right thing. If we don't do that, then what's going to happen is the consumer is going to get really annoyed. The end user is just not going to engage effectively, and we're all going to lose out. So to my mind, that's vital. Second, and I took the point from earlier, and it's really well made, that we've got to make sure that we understand how the consumer is using and engaging with all forms of technology. And we've got to do that in an agile way. I mean, frankly, you know, I worked at Procter & Gamble for 30 years. We spent an enormous amount of money in end user or consumer research. And I'm not sure that we are spending all of the money that we should be in that context.
Okay, thank you. But from from a developer's viewpoint, Grant, listening, you know, you've listened to everything all the guys have said. What is, and we're not naming names or doing anything here, whether it's a positive or a negative, just talking about it generally. What's been your experience of this opening up of this interoperability in trying to deliver new technology?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects on the interoperability side to look at, and you know, one of those is being as the industry is allowing, you know, any hardware platform or software service to talk to any ARC, having, you know, commonalities in the communication protocols we use, and making sure that, you know, we are truly interoperable between the back end and the front end devices and sensors, etc. I think that's key. But I think the other thing that we need to consider as well as an industry is consumerization. And you know, you hinted previously about the concept of bring your own device. That's going to be happening soon. You know, there's an expectation from the user, the consumer of these services, the people that we're looking after at the end of the day, that, you know, they can get this level of service from their mobile phone. And, you know, yes, we could provide that today. As a developer at the moment, I'm not comfortable with it because it means that I can't guarantee robustness or quality of service. Hence the duty of care alarm bells ringing for me because I can't provide the service I want to. But I think at some point in the future, we're going to have to, because that's what the expectation is. So I think there's a couple of different facets to interoperability. You know, what we do today as an industry, you know, with this kind of analog to digital migration project that we're all undertaking, you know, that's a journey, and the clock's clicking down. But there's also that consumerization piece, which is going to happen sooner or later.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, let's move on to another question. This one's for you, Mr. Finch, and it's from one of our erstwhile competitors, actually. Somebody who's sort of I'd like to think of them as a fellow disruptor. The question's been asked: how important do you believe new entrants to the technology-enabled care marketplace are to driving innovation and change in the way services are delivered?
I think we welcome challenge, we welcome disruption, to see challenge the status quo, see how things can be done more efficiently, more effectively for people. So in the standards world in particular, we're always interested to see new ideas, what we can include within the quality standards framework, for example, what people believe should be in there. That's part of the development approach we have with the quality standards framework. It's understanding what, if we talk about interoperability, for example, what other service users, service providers and suppliers believe should be in the standards that we can then go through the correct channels to implement, and we will always consider that. So for me, yeah, welcome change, welcome new ideas, and we will evaluate them and make sure that they're safe and secure to go through the framework.
Okay. What's your thoughts on that, Mark, about new entrants, innovation?
I think it's a really interesting question. My immediate reaction is, yeah, all the time. It's always good to see innovation. My problem with it is that a lot of the innovation that I see that's claimed to be innovation is limited in its scope. That it's innovative technically, but in terms of service delivery, it's a backward step. And I think some of the times when I ask questions about how do you demonstrate evidentially that this will do X, Y, and Z. I either get the response, well, it's too new, or well, we haven't done that, or I never hear from them again. So I think there's a real challenge there in terms of innovation, and innovation doesn't stop at how many resistors or transistors you can shove into a box. It's more about actually, is it a complete product that delivers a quality outcome for individuals, which I think is the rounded view of what innovation is. So if people are taking that approach, bring it on. It's great. It's fantastic. But what irks me a lot of the time is we see claimed innovative products that when you delve behind it, it's just another piece of equipment that someone's trying to sell. So I think it's a fascinating question. It's really good. I love the disruptive nature of it, but it requires careful scrutiny.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. There's surface level innovation that's not really innovation. It's painting something a different colour. And then there's real innovation. And for me, as a 60-year-old, I'm on that journey now, and I want something that will travel that journey with me, because my needs will change. So I'm looking at this from a very personal viewpoint. So what I need now is not necessarily what I'll need in 5 and 10 and 15 years time, but if that technology, if that solution maintained familiarity for me, it was changeable, it could evolve with me. I know that familiarity will be very important to me, particularly as I grow older and go into my dotage. I know it's going to be very important, and I think that's where a lot of innovation is going to be required. Roy, you've got your hand up there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Peter. I just want to make a comment on this because I am interested in the way in which innovations happen in the private sector and in the public sector. And one thing I would say is that we do not have in this country a good system for doing what I would call test, learn, and scale. Or if you like, test, learn, iterate, and scale. Our procurement processes are extremely fragmented. We don't really have a tech market in this context into which innovators can essentially go and test their product out. And I think it's a massive problem because there are other sectors of the world in which that test, learn, and scale thing happens much more smoothly. Now, I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm just identifying the problem. I think it is something the TSA could work on together with Innovate UK and others who have big responsibility for moving innovation from spin out or startup right through to execution. But I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
No, that's very, very relevant. I think so. For example, we're doing some work with Southampton Uni and looking to work with Innovate UK going forward. But one of the things that, in order to test that R&D side, is particularly if you're looking at AI and machine learning, is you need the data in the first place. Now, there are organisations that have that data in different ways, and you're absolutely right, Roy. I mean, I know that the NHSX and various other organisations, and we've been asked to join a digital health accelerator. There are these things coming, but I don't disagree that they can't get here soon enough, and it will benefit everything and everybody. What's your thoughts on the innovation side, Paul? Paul Shead.
As an example, we run a partner program, which means that innovators can put their products through a factory acceptance testing process and interoperate and demonstrate interoperability with the UMO monitoring platform. Now, if I look at the partners in that list, we have now nearly 200 manufacturers and 300 telecare and tech devices have already gone through that program. So if I look at the proportion, I would say that 2/3 of all of those are from innovators, brand new products, trying to do innovative things with services. And what's quite interesting is because we only provide the monitoring platform, it's our customers who actually trial these. It's our customers who start trying out these new facilities, new devices, and trying to create a wraparound service that takes advantage of that. So we see that across Europe. There's more interest in other countries than in the UK in certain types of product. For example, telehealth type devices have established better in other markets than they have in the UK. I mean, we've talked about it for 30 odd years here in the UK, but not really seen it in any kind of scale yet. And there's a lot more video type interaction in other countries and a lot more preventative type services being given in other countries than in the UK. So despite the UK being the longest established best market for telecare, with what, 1.7 million-ish users of telecare services, we're actually quite a way behind in innovative services, I think.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think that the approach you guys are taking in terms of that openness and you know, we're taking part in your partner program, as you know, but I think that it's that approach that you actually help drive innovation. I think all respect to you guys for that. What about you, Grant? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and you know, I think we could do well to look at other markets. You know, take the Dutch, the Nordics, the Scandics in particular. You know, these guys are, they've got the same technology at their fingertips. They just do it different. You know, the Nordics and Scandics as a race are very innovative in their thoughts. They don't talk about it much. They just keep quiet and get on with it. But the end result is they've really implemented some cracking technology, and they've done it right. And I think, you know, we can do a lot to keep an eye on that. But like all things, it needs to be driven from the top. You know, that initiative needs to be centralized and pushed down to us. You know, it shouldn't be down to the vendors to be pushing this technology. There needs to be government directives and initiatives to get this in place, because at the end of the day, we need to keep people in their homes for longer. We need to keep people out of care homes, because, you know, in a few years' time, this problem is going to get worse. And the only way we can do that is by improving the quality of care we're providing for people at home. And that's not reactive with blue light services. It's being proactive. It's checking in on people. It's checking up on people. It's using health information and health data properly to make sure that people are all right. It's to spot issues, you know, early on. And nip those problems in the bud before they actually end up in an emergency call, because we all know a blue light services cost more than checking up on someone, and you know that needs to be funded accordingly.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That actually plays to a question that's been sent in for I'm pointing at Roy. Do you think we need to educate the general population as to the benefits of using health and care technology more than the NHS in terms of doctors?
Yes, and there in fact is some, I think, data around on that, and I'll be happy to share it if I can remember where I saw it. It's in some research anyway. It's in some research, and the very interesting thing on this is that it's all about benchmarking, because the general population doesn't quite understand the value, the true value for themselves of the technologies that we're all talking about today, in making sure that they can stay living independently and happily in the place that they are. And that piece of that position is very unclear until you say to them, if I can give you some technology that will prevent you from having to go in a care home in the next year, how much would that be worth? And many people say it'll be worth £10,000, £20,000. And so it's all about positioning the value of what we do in a way which makes sense and adds real clarity for the outcome in terms of people's lives. And so there is a gap there. It's a messaging and it's a narrative gap, but it's one that we better fill, because otherwise people will say, oh, I'll just leave it for another year or two. I'll just leave it, or I'll just leave it. And our approach to prevention will then fail. So I'll dig out that research if I can when I'm out of the car, and I'll send it to you, Peter. Okay?
Yeah, if you could, and
It's a
we'll
very,
put it
very
up on.
well-made point. We just don't give the right value equation to the general population, and yet we could.
Yeah, no, totally with you on that. It's interesting, and if you can send us that for everybody who's watching, we'll put it up on our
I should say one other thing, by the way, that if we don't do that, then we don't have access to the probably £1 trillion that sits in the wealth arena of the over 65 community. Remember, these are people who predominantly own their own homes. They've got generally got gold-plated pensions. The baby boomer group I'm talking about, and so we're not getting access to them because we don't give them a really good value equation for the kind of work that we can do to help them live their lives independently for longer. It's a long conversation that we could have, but that's just Roy's view of the world right now, and that's got to change.
I think as well, Roy, something that we often don't take into consideration is, the people that are going to be paying for their own care moving forwards. They will be paying themselves out of their savings and their pensions and the equity that's in their homes when they move into a care home. If we can keep them in their own home for a few years longer, using technology and services like this, it improves the quality of their life. It keeps them more comfortable. And, it's in their interest to stay out of a care home because of that quality of life equation.
Well said.
No, absolutely. I think the comment I made earlier on today, it asked the question, when's the last time, talking about the direct to consumer side of things, when's the last time you ever saw an advert on TV for telecare? And the fact that would be never, because you're effectively advertising death. And, if we give you one of these units, you're ready for the knacker's yard. The whole approach that this takes, the whole picture, the whole image of digitally enabled, technology enabled care is about older people, I think, and people who are either frail, disabled, have issues. We need to change that perception, because if we're going to make this work, we need to change that perception amongst our people of my age and up, how beneficial technology can be to them. And it's an approach we're certainly going to be taking, and hopefully many others. What's your thoughts on this, Mr. Finch?
Two thoughts on this, one from a TSA perspective and one from a personal perspective, is that I think the numbers speak for themselves in some degree. If you think that less than 2 million people are using tech, or around about 2 million people using tech, yet we've got over 10 million over the age of 65 in the UK. So there's only a fifth of that section of population using tech. But then if you also consider that tech isn't just for older people, which I suppose is one of the misnomers around tech, it can be used for any walk of life where there's a need for tech. So I think, yes, despite TSA's efforts to promote tech through the tech explainers we published recently, and a lot of the other promotional material we get out there, there's still an education piece to be delivered. From a personal perspective, even when I was in service delivery, we'd go to people to install equipment, and the person would say, I don't really want this, it's because my daughter wants me to have it. And that's usually because it's happened after an incident, they've had a fall outside. And I think from one of the comments you just made there, Peter, that you're on the slippery slope if you've got technology-enabled care going in your house, and there's this badge of need from the devices in the house. And I think we've got to move away from that. That is, I suppose, make it part of person's everyday living. That this isn't seen as a device that's means they're on the knacker's yard or in the knacker's yard, but actually something that they can use to their advantage and use as a big benefit to help their life.
Absolutely. I think, and I think it's a key. What about your side of things, Mark? I mean, if you look at the population of Hampshire, you look at that aging population, there's a certain amount of that population that are going to be self-sufficient and not going to be coming to you for help as such. How important it is, do you feel, to Hampshire that everybody's educated?
It's very important. I mean, part of the partnership we've got is we asked them to set up a private pay offer, because when I put this together, I recognised that we would only ever service a proportion of the population. If you look at Hampshire, we provide services to about 13,000 people. Probably 11,000 of those are older people, a couple of thousand are younger adults. But the over 65 population in Hampshire is knocking on the door of 300,000. Do the maths. I mean, it's, there will be a proportion of that population that would benefit from devices like this. But I think the challenge in that is a shared one. It's to all of our benefit to ensure that actually these sorts of services are seen very differently and are available to the general public. So the comments are always made are absolutely bang on. We've got this shared responsibility to ensure that people can access these devices, but we need to look beyond our own shores. We need to have a concept of services that are not just about the devices we make. It's about lifestyle and enabling people to live more independent lifestyles, and that will be that blended approach. We're starting to use things like the Alexa. A really good example of that was we often provide devices to help people take their medication prompters, Pivotels and stuff like that. Well, in actual fact, they've got an Alexa in their home that can remind them quite adequately. They don't need any of that stuff. But yet we will put this device in because they happen to be old, and that's what you get when you're old. Of course you haven't got an Alexa and you never use it because you're a bit doolally. That's just not the case. We need to think slightly differently about how we approach these sorts of services. And yes, they're not just for old people. We provide services to children's services. So we've got some very severely disabled young people that are using devices in very creative ways to help them live independent lives, to free up the time of their parents so that they can live independent and freer lives and all the rest of it. So the capabilities are really there. It's how we've sold it. And I think the last point is I think there is a bit of history here that we probably need to get over the back of, which is the telecare services industry, or tech industry as you want to call it now, or whatever, has generally for a number of years relied upon either local authorities, housing associations or whatever to be the funders of it. What we're talking about is consumers. And I think this market has actually really developed to appeal to consumers. And that plays to the innovation platform as well, is that whole issue around, the scale and developing and pushing out innovative products. That happens in the private sector because people choose to buy things. If a product is good, people will buy it. The platforms that we've got in this country around developing technologies, they'll come to people like me and expect me to make a decision about what we purchase on scale so that they can make a buck. It needs to be a slightly different model, and that's a collective responsibility to do that. It isn't just manufacturers, it isn't just the TSA, it isn't just health, it isn't just social care or local authorities. It's all of us to think about how we can develop a much more appropriate private sector market for this stuff, because that's what's going to really make an impact, I think.
Absolutely.
I think as well, Mark, it's providing that transition, from a concerned son, daughter, or grandchild that wants something to keep an eye on their elderly relative. As they transition through needing more and more care. And the way technology is progressing, we've got that availability now. We can do that. As they need more care, we can go from sending them an SMS message or a voicemail to bringing on board an ARC with more extensive services and you know, we can really ease that transition process.
I think
To be honest, Grant, as an older person again, and that seems to be a theme with me today, but as an older person again, I'd rather take care and keep an eye on myself. Thank you very much. And the longer I can take care of and keep an eye on myself rather than having my children or somebody else doing that, the better. And this idea of educating people, I mean, it's why I swapped the background you guys will see behind me, because that's our whole premise. Our whole premise is these are our funky older people. This is about keeping active. It's about aging happily, aging healthily, aging smart. And I think that's...
I think you've gone quiet.
You've disappeared, Peter.
That's the way it's got to look.
Can I just make a point?
Sorry.
As well? It's a bit of a plea. Is that I think there's also an issue here around design and how we design the products we expect people to use is a really important one. We've had a couple of experiences this recently where people have accepted the devices and then we found out later they just haven't used it, and it was because it didn't fit. And just a sort of an analogy would be in the day and age where we've got really intelligent smartphones, we've given them a 1980s Nokia and saying that'll do you. It's just not good enough. Honestly, it really isn't.
It's not, and it's that familiarity thing again. You know, you look at the you know, it's been a subject a lot today, the box-based approach. This age group, you know, what is the most familiar thing they have? You know, I can't, my background, so I'm holding up a smartphone, but it's there you go. And that's, is there anybody sitting around here now who hasn't got one? So if you want to introduce people into those services, into these services, and make it seem a part of their lives, it's got to be something that they're familiar with, and that's the way forward. Couple of minutes, anything to add, Mr. Shead?
Only that I think the whole model of delivery will change over the next 10 years. We see signs of it in the Netherlands, in Germany, and other countries, where the telecare element is just a hidden part of the service. Overall, they're paying subscriptions to have a digital device, usually a bring your own device. Maybe they run an app on that to call for help when they need it. But the primary purpose and the reason they pay for it is so they can video their daughter, or they can play chess remotely with a friend. It's paying for those sort of things that enhance their day-to-day lives, and often wrapped around into entertainment and pleasure. But actually behind it, that same infrastructure can deliver the support that they need when they need it.
And that, for example, video plays to other funding streams.
Exactly.
So it makes it, you know, you look at the isolation side of things digitally, it's thinking outside the box. Guys, again, thank you very much indeed. Been a very, very interesting session. I don't think we've got any more questions, and we certainly haven't got any time for any more, but thank you very much indeed. If anybody wants to ask anything going forward, just drop a message to us at Yorbl and we'll pass questions on. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to seeing you in 5 minutes or so in the closing session. See you then. Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.